Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kaylee Smith. I'm on the Dementia Australia board, and I'm thrilled to be your MC here today. I wanted to welcome you on behalf of the Parliamentary Friends of Dementia event here at Parliament House, and welcome you and welcome everyone joining us on the live stream at home. Firstly, today we are Ngunnawal country. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today, and to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and to our shared futures. Please note that today is being live streamed and photography is taking place throughout the event for promotional purposes. If there is anyone who does not wish to be filmed or photographed, please alert one of our staff members and we will ensure that that does not occur. Thank you. I'd like to welcome, first of all, Helen Polly, who is one of our co-chairs of Federal Parliamentary Friends of Dementia. Given it is a sitting week, things are in transition today, so I'd like to welcome her to the stage to say a few words before I go back and do the rest of the opening remarks. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, and just it is unusual in this place to be able to give a speech without some interruption, but today's a very special day because it's the last function of Dementia Australia and Friends of Dementia for this year. But I'd also like to welcome David Skies with us today, the Director of the Centre for Dementia Learning at Dementia Australia, who will facilitate the panel discussion today. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet and pay my respect to elders past and emerging. I would like to, in their absence, acknowledge the Chair of Dementia Australia, Graham Samuel, AC, and CEO of Dementia Australia, Marie McCabe, AM. I'd also like to mention the fabulous co-convener, Nola Marina. As always, we work so well together in other areas around Parliament, but to have her now as my co-convener is really good because it just means that we've got that experience, and it's important to have someone from that other dark place they call the House of Reps, as opposed to the Senate. I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that the Minister for Aged Care, Annika Wells, was going to be here this morning, but unfortunately there's a censure motion in the House of Reps at the moment, so hence people are trapped in there. Normally you would see more senators and members popping in and out. So we have staff from the Minister's office, so they will be listening very carefully to what I have to say. It has been quite some time since we've had either a in-person event like Friends of Dementia and others. So to have people in the Parliament today in person after COVID in the last couple of years is really important. But as the co-convener of the 47th Parliament, Nola and I, and with Dementia Australia, we've already started mapping out what 2023 is going to look like. And it's going to be big, it's going to be exciting, and we're going to continue our work to raise awareness within the community. I'd also, having spoken to a number of people here today, and people usually ask, what brought you to be convener of Dementia? I think for most of us, I know for Nola as well, it's that connection with your family. So my brother-in-law, it took 7 years to diagnose him. When he was finally diagnosed, he was 38 years of age. So early onset dementia was part of my family's journey. And unfortunately, on my husband's side, it's quite prevalent in his family, losing both my mother and father-in-law. But this Friends of Dementia has been in this place for a decade, if not longer. And it's so commendable to Dementia Australia for the work that they've done in raising awareness, because it is really important for senators and members and their staff to have a full understanding of what dementia is. So part of what we do is trying to break down the myths surrounding dementia and what it means for those who've been diagnosed. So I'm delighted to be here this morning. And in the past, we've had a number of celebrities and people with high profiles that have, shone the light on dementia. But dementia does not discriminate against anyone. So I'm sure we've all read the The media recently, in relation to our well-known Australian actor who has the genetic genes, unfortunately, and I think in terms of Chris Hemsworth, what he will bring in terms of in time, I'm sure, will enable us to continue to benefit. And it is unfortunate, I go back to breast cancer. The reason breast cancer is so well known and understood is because celebrities have been touched by it, let's be real. So in terms of the work that we need to do is ongoing. And in this place, I'm sure Nola will agree, it's the noisy wheel that gets the attention. So it's the Friends of Dementia for being here regularly. You're always in the mind of members and senators. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank Dementia Australia for all the work that they've done through this year. In fact, over the last few years, it's been very challenging with COVID and the pandemic. But our work will continue. We have achieved a lot, I think, in this year, but we have so much more to do. So I'd like to thank you all for coming today because it is important. And as much as Nola and I don't like the attention of having to get up and speak in front of people and have our photo taken, the real message around dementia is carried by you. Because when you talk about your own journey or you talk about your role as a carer, that is powerful. That is really powerful. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you do. And I know how difficult it is for carers. I know too many carers of early onset have to leave the workforce, so that impacts the economy. We've got a lot more work to do in aged care, in getting recognition for those who undertake the training to understand dementia. And we know people who work in aged care really deserve so much more in terms of remuneration for the work that they do. But thank you very much, and I'd like to take the opportunity to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, a safe and Happy New Year, and we will see you back here in 2023, bigger and better, and I appreciate what you do every single day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Polly. I'm so happy we got the time with you this morning. And a sincere thank you for all of your work over the past decade. You've been an exceptional co-chair, and we sincerely thank you for the work that you've done on behalf of Dementia Australia and people and carers living with dementia everywhere. So thank you so much. Right, I'm going to slip back a little bit to regular programming, if you'll allow me so. So, first of all, I'd like to pass on my sincere apologies from Graham Samuel, AC, the Chair of Dementia Australia, and Marie McCabe, AM, the CEO of Dementia Australia. Unfortunately, neither of them were able to be here today, so you have me stepping in last minute to become the MC. We miss them dearly, and we thank them for all of their work on behalf of people living with dementia. Unfortunately, unforeseen circumstances means that neither of them could be here today. So, if you're not familiar with the workings of a sitting week in Parliament, there may be some bells that sound, and you may see some people run from this room very quickly in high heels, I noted before, so well done. If that happens, we will attempt to go on. If the bells are too loud, we may need to pause, but let's just roll with it and see how we go as the morning goes on. So with that, I'd like to also welcome Nola Marino. So welcome, Nola. I'm delighted to announce that Nola, the member for Forest, has joined us as the new Federal Parliamentary Friends of Dementia co-chair. We're so grateful to have you, Nola. Thank you so much for your commitment to working with us. And this is the first event that you're appearing at in this role, so thank you and welcome. I'd also like to welcome some other people. So I'd like to welcome Deputy Chief Medical Officer Professor Michael Kitt, AM. I'd also like to welcome and acknowledge former Dementia Australia board member Greg Fraser. And welcome to all of our dementia advocates that are here today. Thank you so much for the time and for the work that you do. We're beyond proud of the work that you do, and we're so grateful that you're here with us today. So thank you. Shortly, you'll hear from our panel, Parliamentary Friends of Dementia, who will discuss why embedding dementia education is critical to quality care. With 65% of all those in residential aged care having a moderate to severe cognitive impairment, and 70% of the over 400,000 Australians with dementia living in the community accessing in-home care, all staff employed and entrusted to provide care must be appropriately trained in dementia care. We have people joining us today, both here and on the live stream, who are living with dementia. They need to know that the people responsible for providing their care in their home or in residential care are appropriately trained in dementia care. These are the most vulnerable people in our community. They're relying on us to get it right, and as we know, dementia does not discriminate. Any one of us or our loved ones could develop dementia, and we know many of us will. It's just so important for us to know that receiving quality dementia care will be guaranteed, and the key to that is ensuring a minimum level of compulsory dementia care education for the aged care workforce. So, now it's time for our panel discussion, which I know you're all eagerly awaiting. It'll be led by David Sykes, Director of Centre for Dementia Learning at Dementia Australia. So now, if I can invite Bronte, Cam, Vicky and David to the stage to commence the discussion regarding how embedding dementia education is critical to quality care. So joining David on the panel are two Dementia Australia dementia advocates, Bronte Parkin, Cam Stewart, and along with Vicky Kane, Residence Manager at R-Care Aged Care in Pimpama, did I say that correct? Pimpama, Queensland. Bronte started his career as a secondary school science teacher and ended it at the senior executive level of the WA public sector in education. His wife, Dr. Glenda Parkin, was diagnosed with dementia at age 56 with a rare form of dementia known as posterior cortical atrophy. He has been an incredible active dementia advocate for 12 years as a former member of the board of Alzheimer's WA. Glenda now lives full-time in residential aged care. Bronte serves on two committees with the Australian Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare, created by the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety. These committees are reviewing the clinical care standards in aged care and the use of psychotropic medicines in managing changed behaviours. Cam Stewart is an ex-serviceman who spent 22 years in RAAF maintenance, engineering and aircraft procurement. He later worked as a consultant in the public service in the Department of Defence. Cam was diagnosed with younger onset mixed dementia in 2019, aged 59, and he's since become an active Dementia Australia dementia advocate. Vicky Kane, on the end, is a registered nurse and works as a residence manager at R-Care Aged Care. Vicky's passion for working with people living with dementia and their families stemmed from her late teens when she volunteered at the local nursing home. Vicky became a registered nurse and completed postgraduate studies in gerontology with a focus on dementia care. Please welcome our panel, and we're thrilled that you're all here.
Thanks very much, Kaylee. And I'd like to probably start my question to you, Bronte. Your wife, Glenda, has an unusual or a rarer form of dementia, posterior cortical atrophy. And can you tell us why having that diagnosis and that information is so important, not just for her life, but more particularly for the people providing care and the staff providing that support to her?
Okay, thanks. Well, my answer is really quite simple, and that is get the training, know the diagnosis, know the behaviours expected, and then better know how to manage those behaviours. So that's the premise from which I come from, and it's based on caring for my wife for 10 years with this unusual disease called posterior cortical atrophy, which is the visual variant of Alzheimer's disease, sort of functional blindness. And also from my 12 years as an advocate for dementia, interacting with many other people with dementia, some of whom don't necessarily know their diagnosis. They believe they have dementia or have been told they have dementia. And also from the many people I now observe in the care home where my wife resides. So not everyone, of course, with dementia displays the same types of behaviour. Dementia affects each person differently depending on the underlying causes, the disease, other health conditions they may have, and also the level of cognitive functionality that they had before they became ill. So I personally believe that it's important, regardless of the age of the individual, to have a diagnosis and to go through the necessary steps, ultimately perhaps to have a brain scan. Some of the anecdotal stories are that I've met people who, when you ask them what is wrong with you, and they say, I've got dementia, and if I ask, do you know the disease that's causing those dementia symptoms? And they don't. They just say, oh, my doctor said I had dementia. Then other people, of course, say, well, I've got Alzheimer's disease, but I don't have dementia. Well, that's an interesting point, because dementia, as we know, is a suite of symptoms with many different underlying causes. And if doctors didn't carry out extensive testing, they'd be right 70% of the time that someone does have Alzheimer's disease, because that's about the proportion of people with dementia that have a cause, and that is Alzheimer's disease. So my view is that get the diagnosis right, get the training, understand the causes of dementia, and then aged care workers, regardless of their position or status in the organisation, or whether they're home care workers, will then have a much better job of managing that person's changing behaviours.
Thanks, Bronte. And so with Glenda in residential aged care, have you noticed how important that education of the staff in that facility is to the care that she's receiving?
Well, I wouldn't want to be critical of the care home where she is, which is doing a fantastic job, but I think when someone with her particular unique disease, which is, as I said, functional blindness, people forget that she's actually technically blind. So putting a glass in front of her and expecting her to know what it is just doesn't work. And I don't know how many times I've told carers, it's no good putting something in front of Glenda because she doesn't know what it is. She doesn't see. She sees a glass, but it has no visual recognition capability because that's the part of her brain which has deteriorated. So as a former educator, I believe in the power of education and training, of course, and I think that all people in caring professions, whether they be in childcare, schools or hospitals, we wouldn't dare think that those people didn't have adequate ongoing training. So why should aged care and dementia care be any different? So I think coming down the pipeline, there are some very interesting revised standards. So it was mentioned when I was introduced that I'm on 2 federal government committees to do with clinical care standards in aged care. And also the other one is looking at the use of psychotropic medications. And just for interest to show you, so I'm meant to be at another meeting today here in Canberra on psychotropic medications. Here is the 80-page standard just on psychotropic medications alone. And if we expect care workers at all levels of the organisation to understand that, they will need extensive training. And I would say to the politicians here that for example, how much time you spend dwelling on each word and each clause in the legislation that you've been asked to review, or policy documents, that you hope will give effect to that outcome. Well, those of us on these committees pore over every word, and every clause and every sentence in these documents as well. And if they're to have any chance of success in being implemented so that the intent of the Royal Commission into aged care comes to fruition and the quality of aged care improves, then it's inevitable that we'll need staff to be trained to understand the nuances and to understand and interpret these in the way that those of us who have crafted this stuff believe that it would apply, and so that we can be confident that the quality of aged care and dementia care will improve.
Thanks, Bronte. Can I come to you now, as someone living with younger onset dementia? How important is it to you to know that the people providing support and care to you now and into the future have a really good understanding of dementia?
Good question, David. Stories and outcomes that were documented in the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety really scare me, and my wife and my kids. Knowing that's one day, that's where I'm going to reside. And I don't think it takes a genius to work out what I'm talking about there. As Bronte said, we're all different. And carers will need to understand me. They need to know what triggers my behaviour and how to manage it if triggered. I can be nasty just like a lot of other people. If you don't understand it, you can't manage it. And this is paramount to a lot of things. And I think, as I said, Bronte's alluded to that already. I'm very sensitive to people's tone, their body language, particularly where it's patronising, angry or annoying or frustrating. And that is one of the common traits. We pick up on those things very easily. And in a care home, it's when you have people that are frustrated and annoyed and angry with you, that just escalates exponentially. It can be dangerous for both carers and residents if carers don't know how to manage each individual, and we all have our individual quirks and triggers. Education is one essential element, as Bronte's pointed out quite poignantly. It's the cornerstone. But recruiting staff with the right attributes, for example, empathy and patience, also needs to be considered. These things can't be taught. These are natural attributes that people have or they don't have. And they need the right reasons for being there as well. I know there's a lot of money being sunk into aged care, but it needs to go to the right places and people need to be accountable for where it goes. Nice smelling food attracts blowflies as well as butterflies. But even the most empathetic and patient person will have a tolerance limit, and this needs to be managed. My wife's an ex-nurse. She's one of the most tolerant, loving, caring people that I know. But I drive her crazy, and I have to go to respite sometimes because I'm impossible to live with. And this is a person that's so tolerant. It's just a fact of life. So we need staff ratios to be considered as well as part of all this funding. And once educated, the staff need to truly get to know their residents personally, including their triggers and behaviour, and to be able to tag team when frustrated and for peer support. And what I mean by tag team is this is coming down to staffing ratios. If a person gets angry with one of their residents, they're likely to either leave them alone in their own filth and mess and move on to do someone else, and may not even get back to them because they might have 10 people to do in an hour, because that's the rules. So that's why you hear these horror stories, and we can be really difficult to manage. But if people are educated and they know what triggers them, they can avoid it, and if it does get triggered, they know how to stop it de-escalating. Also, if the staff numbers are adequate, when that person's had enough, they can call in their tag team partner, say, look, I can't do this, I've got to move on to someone else. How about you take over? It's imperative, it's imperative. It's a multifaceted problem. So, being an engineer, we need a systems approach to this. To resolution, the key to start with is, as Bronte says, education. Nothing's going to happen without the education. It's the bedrock. And nothing else will be successful without initial and ongoing education.
Thanks, Cam. And the other thing I'd be interested to hear from you, Cam, is we know obviously the built environment is just so important for dementia care, and I had my own experience here in Parliament before trying to find the toilet, which maybe we do need to do an environmental audit here at some point. But how important is that in providing care in a context that you can navigate and you can feel comfortable with and not be distressed by?
I guess there are many, probably people look at me, and even some people today, they said, who are you? So I came and said, oh, why are you here? Oh, I'm an advocate, I've got dementia. They go, you can see it in their eyes straight away. Oh, and you people may be saying them now, somebody you don't know, go, oh, really, has he got dementia? There are many generally unknown aspects to dementia that haven't been considered in urban design. Dementia is not just a memory issue, and these include, and some of these are mine, a lot of these are mine, we have loss of depth perception. We can trip over stages, we can trip over little lumps in the ground, all sorts of things. We have problems with colour differentiation. If colours aren't contrasting, then you don't pick them up. And I had a good example only on Sunday. We're at the younger onset dementia Christmas party, and the guy next to me, he spoke as well as I did, I do, and you wouldn't know he had dementia. He had his pudding and his ice cream in front of him, and he looked down and he said, oh, can I have some ice cream? And he said, you've got ice cream there. He couldn't see the white ice cream on the white plate, and it was right in front of him. It's quite amazing how much it impacts you. Loss of speech. A lot of people have loss of speech, and when I get tired, I start to lose my speech. And some people, I think it's called aphasia, they just can't speak at all, they just forget how to talk. And it's so frustrating for them and their partners. Hearing problems, like even today when the noise is going on, I had trouble hearing what people were saying when I was talking to them because of all the noise. I just can't pick up on what they're saying, and it gets very exhausting. Disorientation and confusion. in big crowds or in busy places, you get lost. I was at the shopping centre. I'm normally not too bad. I'm reasonably independent, but I went to the shopping centre, and sometimes you have these moments. You just walk in and you go, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, and you sort of have to sit there and wait and look around for clues. And unless there's the clues, you just don't know where you are until it comes back to you. And this leads to problems with travelling and socialising, and obviously when in care facilities. I mean, there's trip hazards on the pathways. Canberra's terrible with their footpaths, and mats, gutters, uneven surfaces. And I was interested to notice in Sydney the other day that I saw on the news they were advertising something I'm trying, a 3D pedestrian crossing. That when the driver drives up to it, it looks like 3D, and you can see it in the picture. Now, I don't know whether it's the same vision when you're crossing. I would hope not, but I guess, has that been considered? These are just the simple things. Confusing and insufficient signage. I'm assuming other places have things like Chemist Warehouse in Canberra. You walk into there and the aisles are 6 feet apart, 12 feet high, and no signage. You walk in there, and with the crowds they get in there, it's just overwhelming. That's unbelievable. And I've explained the issue we have with noisy environments. And it's not to say that people should go into restaurants and everybody should be quiet. On the contrary, you're there to enjoy yourself. But people need to be aware that when the waiter asks you something, you may not even hear him or may not understand what they're saying. So there's those things, and you can yourselves can put that across to as many other scenarios as you like where there's a bit of noise. So generally, that's some of the problems that I and some of my
thank you for those
people have
insights.
seen.
Vicky, we've heard a lot from Bronte and Cam about just the foundationally important aspect of having that dementia education for staff providing care, whether it's in the home or in a residential context. From your experience working in aged care, tell us about how important that is and what you've seen when staff have had that sort of education and the impact that's had on the practice.
You'll probably notice that I'm nodding a lot, and it's those aha, yes, 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 and all of these experiences. So I cannot stress enough how important and critical education is from day one and ongoing. So in our organisation, we're starting to embed all of our mandatory and compulsory education around dementia specific from the get-go. So then all training then becomes quite easy because you can embed that in. So I'll give you a good example. I'm very passionate about dementia specific, but also about making sure that our staff know the story. So I spend a lot of time doing education as a manager. I travel around Queensland for R-Care and educate sites. I also do the same education for residents, relatives, consumers, stakeholders, because I think the message has to be the same for everybody. So everybody's on the same journey. So I can give you a really great scenario. So we have a resident in our community who came to us, and for the first 6 months, she'd continually between 6 and 7 in the evening start banging doors, threatening other residents, breaking things, being very, very emotionally distressed. And so it was about, okay, what's triggering this? And she came to us on psychotropic medication, as Cam and Bronte had mentioned, that we thought, no, we know enough about dementia, and particular dementia, that was like giving her a tic-tac. So, we knew that wasn't going to work. So we kept meeting with the family and, can you share with us Mum's story? No, nothing happened, everything was good. Until one day I got them all to come in, 4 children, and sat down with them, and I said, look, this can be very confronting, it can be very difficult to have that discussion about Mum. But is there anything in Mum's life that be causing her to relive those moments? Is there trauma? And we talk about trauma-informed care. And please don't be embarrassed, ashamed, because everything you tell us helps us support Mum's journey and her quality of life. So it wasn't until that 6-month mark that the son opened up and he said, well, there is something. He said, when Mum was a teenager, she was tasked with looking after the 9 siblings, and their dad would come home between 6 and 7 at night from the pub and beat the mum. And so this particular resident would have to get all the siblings and hide them to then find out that happened in her own marriage as well. So she had experienced a lot of trauma and she was reliving that. So what she was doing was trying to make everybody safe in the facility between that time. So what we did is we actually found out the story and all of those things, and then working with the staff, we provided the education on what, and it doesn't have to be what the experience is, it has to be that there was trauma there. And these are the triggers for that. And how we're going to support her to not be distressed. And so it really was quite a simple process, is that we started to pull the curtains between 6 and 7 o'clock. We would quieten the noise a little bit. We would actually reassure the particular resident that we had guard dogs outside, that we had cameras, and that the police were policing the perimeter and nobody can get in. And I kid you not, it stopped. It stopped. You know, and when she did stop, we'd say, look, we've got the cameras, come and I'll show you the cameras, and we could show her the CCTV video. And so, but that was, because we have such a transient population in aged care, it was about that ongoing education for our staff. Without that, that would not have happened.
So Vicky, with that education piece, what we know, leadership and culture is also really critical at obviously how a service delivers its support. What do you think leadership need to ensure they're doing to ensure that education is then translated and applied to practice, but is also then shared with colleagues?
Yeah, and it's about the networking, but it's about, you know, the leadership team, you know, further up the chain is actually seeing that it works and promoting that. So, for example, I'm on quite a few networks for our care. I'm on the Dementia Australia Community of Practice. Look, we've been on the Today Show. We've been on a lot of different news features because of our success story with education. And we're very, very proud that we've been able to impact that. And our organisation have been able to see those successes. And so now that they're promoting the way we do it across all of our care, and that's 49 facilities across Australia that will be doing the same way of learning and embedding the education specific to dementia in all education. So manual handling, you know, how, if you can, we can all show someone how to use a hoist, but what about when you've got someone that's completely distressed and terrified of going into that hoist? That's the key. Your dining experience, we do all of that wonderfully, but do we do it around the experiences? Cam's talking about the spatial perception, the contrast, the unable to plan. And, you know, I mean, I'm no good going to a fancy restaurant because I don't know what knife and fork to use. I only need one set. So, you know, for someone with dementia, it's important that we can train our staff into serving one serve at a time. You know, if somebody is no longer able to cut up their meal, we can cut it up, but provide them with the fork. And that can only happen through education. And so we've got that in our facility, and our residents actually lay the tables, they clean, they cook, they sweep, they do everything. They take the bins out. All right?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Vicky. Thank you for those examples. I know through our own work at the Centre for Dementia Learning that mentoring, that modelling, that showing how to do it is really powerful in helping that translation into practice.
Yes,
I did also want to acknowledge too, I know the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission have put some work into some online modules, because we also know it's important that boards really understand dementia. They're setting the tone and the direction that then the CEO obviously needs to follow. So really want to acknowledge their work in that space. I know we do a bit of education with boards as well, so that they're on the same page. So I guess we've got the benefit being in Parliament today and being surrounded by members of Parliament. So this is really an opportunity, I guess, for each of you, captive audience as it were, both here and online. What's the one thing you'd want them to take away from today about the importance of that mandatory education for the aged care sector? And perhaps if I can start with you, Bronte.
Okay. Well, I go back to the revised standards for aged care, which cover, of course, dementia care, and just repeat that if the effort that's gone into revising those standards isn't followed through with support through training the staff we expect them to implement those changes, then what's the point of having them? And I think just picking up on Vicky's point and Cam's points, I think these standards, if properly done, properly implemented and funded through the training of staff, ongoing professional development type training I'm talking about here, we can then preserve the dignity of the people living with dementia and for the people who are generally older persons anyway in aged care. So no one's mentioned that word dignity yet this morning, and I think that sits behind everything that is done in this space. So my takeaway is please don't neglect the training needs of those who work in the aged care sector.
Thanks, Monty. Vicky.
My take home would be again, the importance of education. I cannot stress enough when we've got such an ageing population. We're already struggling in aged care, residential care, that we've got to do this. It's urgent. And my biggest thing would be is what will we be prepared to accept when it's our turn? And our turn is coming. And to be able to be ready for our turn, we have to have the people on the ground educated and trained to know my story. I want them to know all of me, the good, the bad and the otherwise. And it's no different for everybody. I don't want to be lost in that. So I cannot stress to you that we need this education to be ready for the next generation as well. And we're already here. And to keep people like myself passionate about it. So.
Thanks, Vicky, and that really reinforces what you were saying, Bronte, that needs to be grounded in a real dignity and respect for that individual and a real empathy. And I think, Cam, your point about the fact that empathy is not something that can be trained. You need to have those qualities that you bring to the work. And obviously, there's a lot of pressures on the sector with staff shortages to get, if you're upright and breathing, potentially. But that does require, you to really be far more discerning in that. So, Cam, coming to you on this point, what's the point you want to have members of Parliament reflect on this piece?
I guess I'd like you to walk away with thinking about not only the importance of education, as you've heard from my colleagues here, but all components of aged care. And when I say aged care, it's not just people with dementia, as Vicky alluded to. We need it, but we need it to support a quality care dementia model, and we need a systems approach that is redesigning the aged care health and safety system. This includes recruiting people who want to be there for the love of the job, not just the money. We need to implement staff ratios or resident staff ratios that enable time to establish relationships, as Vicky passionately talked about. Tag team support, as I mentioned before, and care delivered with empathy, not haste and clock watching. Make aged care facility operators, public and private, accountable for how our taxpayer money is spent. Don't just throw the money at them and expect them to be honest with it, because it won't happen. We all know that. And at the end, everyone should feel confident that they will be treated with respect, treated respectfully and with the care, dignity and empathy once in aged care. We shouldn't be scared and worried when our end is near.
Thanks, Cam. Well, gosh, so much covered there, isn't it? And so moving and so powerful, those your reflections of your own personal experiences. And I'm always humbled when people share those stories. They are so inspiring, and really want to thank you all for bringing those deeply felt feelings and passion that you have for really about improving the system, not just for yourselves, but for others. And that's really what today is about, is really lifting consistently the quality of care that people living with dementia receive, because we know if you get it right for someone living with dementia, you'll actually get it right for everyone. And I think that's the real take home for today. Would you join with me, please, in thanking our wonderful panel?
just like to echo David's comment. A sincere thank you for sharing your authentic and personal stories. I know everyone in the room is really moved. Thank you. It was incredibly insightful, so thank you so much. Please feel free to sit down. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage our new co-chair, the one and only. I've only met you today, but I believe that's a fair statement. The one and only Nola Marina.
Thank you, everyone, and I'm really delighted to work with Helen as a co-convener of the Parliamentary Friends of Dementia, and I really thank you for inviting me to be part of this, given that I have personal experience with my mother's experience late in life. It's something very close to my heart, and which is why I've taken a very strong role also in palliative care for many, many years. So Helen, thank you, and thank you to Dementia Australia for inviting me to be part of this. For those of you who are online today and for those in the room, thank you for being part of this. And I hope that what we've heard today from the panel, and I wanted to thank you particularly, Kaylee, you've done so, but I think what we heard today we were very privileged to hear. And so Bronte, we have mentioned that you are Western Australian, which I appreciated initially, but I think with you, not only have you got personal experience, but you've gone out of your way to try to make a difference by putting your hand up for these roles that you've spoken about and the work, the personal effort that you're putting into the reports, into the information, and to understanding better for future generations. It's not only a really positive outcome potentially for your wife, but it's also a potential outcome for others ahead. And for that, we are very grateful for the time and effort and your passion in this space. Cam, what an inspiration you are. And thank you for sharing your story and being so open. And I think that's a lot more that we need to encourage people to do. And Vicky, I'm so pleased to hear of the changes and what you're implementing within your own facility. And I'd have to say, from my mother's experience, as a family member, one, you've spoken about education and knowing what the diagnosis is. One of the first things my sister and I decided to do was to do a workshop on what to expect and how did we need to look after our mum and love her in the same way, because she'd fallen and broken her spine and couldn't walk anymore and needed permanent care. And she also fell and broke her hip. And so her care was critical to us, and it was challenging. And so we've lived the things that you've spoken about. We lived as a family, but we were determined that she wouldn't have one day where one of us wasn't there, because as her condition advanced, the only real thing in her life, being your older memories that are the ones you do remember, was us. And you spoke about the triggers even. And Mum had lived through, as a very young child of 6 or 7, a fire that burnt out her family home. So it wasn't uncommon when I would rock up at a particular time of the day for her to say to me, Nola, go and get those horses and move them, the fire's coming. And I would, and she was fine. But understanding that and also seeing the need for staff, no matter what the rotation is of staff, to better understand the people that they're giving and care and really support and love to. Because that's what we want as families, as people, with the people we love, being loved wherever they are and trying to live the best life they can. So I just wanted to remind you, if you're not part of the dementia family in a sense, but if you're concerned about someone close to you, please don't forget the Dementia hotline, Dementia Australia hotline. If we can get that out collectively, Helen, and all of you who are watching or here today, please promote the Dementia Australia hotline for everyone, the 1800 100 500, to get you help you need from Dementia Australia. We've got a wonderful group of people with resources working constantly in this space. But if you're concerned, or someone around you that you are concerned about, please get the care as soon as you can. and even working along with this and palliative care in the management of pain as well as conditions, depending on the health of the person, is really, really important. But I want to thank Helen, I want to thank Dementia Australia, I want to thank our speakers, and to all of you who clearly have a genuine interest, the other members of Parliament who are here, and those who are watching online, thank you, and please help all of us in what we've heard today as recommendations. Very sound, very doable, but it's up to each one of us to do our best in that space. So thank you very much to everyone, and thank you to Dementia Australia, Kaylee.
Thank you so much, Nola. We look forward to partnering with you over many years to come, and thank you for sharing the story about your mum. That was a really special moment. Thank you for that. Now, I'd like to thank everyone who's made this event here today possible, and to all of you who have attended, and to our friends out there on the live stream as well. Before we end today's proceedings, I wish to draw your attention to the Federal Government's National Dementia Action Plan, which is now open for public consultation on the Department of Health website. If you've not already done so, we encourage you to take part in the consultation and complete the online survey to ensure that your voice is included. The public consultation is open until the end of January, and to take part, please head to the Department of Health's website. And I believe there's a holding slide up there which shows some more details. Also, I wanted to draw your attention to some important information that we have here today for you. Please don't forget to take home a copy of the information pack with you today, which contains Dementia Australia's position statement, dementia education, and the residential aged care workforce. I do hope you will make yourselves familiar with this document and that it will help inform your thinking moving forward. The recording of today's event will be available online in the coming weeks once we apply some accessibility functionality. The incredibly powerful and moving discussion we just heard from Bronte, Cam and Vicky, and to our co-chairs, we thank you. Thank you for demonstrating how important this conversation is about quality dementia education in our country. I do hope what we've talked about today resonates with everyone in the room and everybody watching on the live stream. And we want to inspire change. We need to embed these quality standards and initiatives into dementia education across our aged care workforce. A reminder also to everyone here in the room and across Australia that Dementia Australia, via the Dementia Australia helpline, is the central point of entry into the provision of pre- and post-diagnostic support to people living with mild cognitive impairment and dementia. As Nola mentioned, it is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No one should have to face dementia alone, and Dementia Australia is a crucial step on the pathway to helping access early, reliable and expert information, advice and a wide range of support programs. We are here for the individuals, for their carers, for aged care and disability workers, and for all healthcare professionals, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. No matter where you are, there is no reason too small. There's no issue too big. You don't need to have this diagnosis of dementia be the end. No time is too late to call the National Dementia Helpline. As Nola mentioned, the number is 1800 100 500. Thank you again so much for your attendance today. I'd like to invite you to stay for some morning tea and refreshments if you have time before continuing on with your day. Please do go and help yourself, and we're going to take a few photos. Thanks again to our panel and to our co-chairs. We sincerely thank you for attending today.